Ava Brooks had dreamed of this day for a long time. After years of hard work and many sacrifices, she was finally moving into her own home. The house was beautiful, a small but cozy place with white walls, big windows that let in sunlight, and a small garden out front. It was in a quiet neighborhood, one filled with tall trees and clean sidewalks. Ava had never imagined she would live here, but now, standing in front of the house with the keys in her hand, she felt proud and hopeful. The morning sun warmed her face as she unlocked the front door for the first time. The smell of fresh paint and new wood filled the air. Boxes were stacked neatly on the porch, waiting to be carried inside. Ava smiled to herself. This was the start of a new chapter in her life. Ava was an architect, and she loved designing homes. But this house wasn't just a project, it was her dream. She had saved every penny she could and worked late nights to get here. This house was a symbol of everything she had done for herself, her hard work and her independence. As she carried the first box inside, she heard soft footsteps behind her. She turned to see a woman watching from across the street. The woman was middle-aged, dressed neatly, with a look of curiosity and maybe a little suspicion on her face. Ava waved and smiled politely. The woman nodded but didn't return the smile. Ava didn't think much of it and went back to unpacking. But the feeling that someone was watching stayed with her. Over the next few days, Ava noticed the neighbors would look at her from their windows or whisper to each other when she walked by. It was as if they were unsure about her. Ava wondered why. She was polite and friendly, always saying hello with a smile. But still, the glances continued. One afternoon, as Ava was arranging flowers in her garden, the woman from across the street approached her. Her name was Judith Caldwell. She introduced herself as a member of the Homeowners Association, or HOA. Ava had heard of HOAs before. They were groups that made rules for neighborhoods to keep them nice and orderly. Judith's smile was tight, not warm. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, but her eyes were sharp. "I wanted to check in and make sure you know the rules." Ava nodded. "Thank you. I've read the HOA guidelines online. I want to follow them." Judith's gaze didn't soften. "Good. We just want to keep the neighborhood looking its best." Over the next few days, Judith visited more often. Each time, her tone was more demanding. She questioned where Ava worked, asked about the cars she owned, and even commented on the style of her garden furniture. Ava felt uncomfortable but stayed polite. She wanted to make a good impression. She thought maybe Judith was just strict. But deep down, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right. One evening, as Ava was locking her door, Judith stopped by again. "You know," she said, "we've had some complaints." Ava's heart beat faster. "Complaints? About what?" Judith looked away, then back. "Your trash bins. They're supposed to be kept out of sight except on collection days." Ava blinked. She had already checked the HOA rules about trash bins and was sure she was following them exactly. "I'm sorry if there's been a mistake," Ava said calmly. "I've only placed the bins out on trash day." Judith gave a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We'll see about that." Ava felt confused and upset. Why was she being singled out? She looked around the street. Other houses had bins out, and no one said a word. That night, Ava sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through emails and HOA documents on her laptop. She wanted to understand the rules better. She also wanted to make sure she wasn't breaking any. But the more she read, the more it seemed the rules were strict but fair. Then why was Judith so harsh with her? Ava thought about calling the HOA office. Maybe she could talk to someone else, someone fairer. The next day, Ava walked to the neighborhood park. The sun was shining, and children were playing. She saw a few neighbors there, chatting and smiling. Ava approached them, hoping to make friends. "Hi, I'm Ava," she said. I just moved in down the street. Most of the neighbors smiled back. Some welcomed her warmly. But a few looked away or stayed quiet. Ava didn't understand. Was it because she was different? Because she was a black woman in a mostly white neighborhood? She wished she could talk openly about it, but she didn't want to cause trouble. That evening, Ava sat on her porch, watching the sun set behind the trees. She felt tired but determined. This house was hers. She belonged here. She decided to keep her head up and not let anyone make her feel small. This was her new beginning. Little did she know, the days ahead would be harder than she thought. The morning sun was soft as it filtered through the leaves of the tall trees lining the quiet street. Ava Brooks stood on her front porch, holding a cup of coffee, watching her new neighborhood slowly wake up. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. It had been a few days since she moved in, and though she was still unpacking and settling, the weight of her new life felt real now. Ava wanted to make a good first impression, so she wore a warm smile whenever she stepped outside. But despite her efforts, she noticed something strange. Some neighbors looked at her with suspicion. Others whispered quietly when they thought she wasn't paying attention. Ava wasn't sure what to think. One morning, as Ava was carrying a box from her car to the porch, she heard a sharp voice behind her. "Excuse me." Ava turned to see a woman standing at the edge of her yard. The woman was in her late 40s, with a tight bun and glasses perched on her nose. She wore a neat dress and looked very serious. "Hello," Ava said politely. "Can I help you?" The woman smiled, but it was not a warm smile. "I'm Judith Caldwell," she said, holding up a small card. "I'm the head of the Homeowners Association here." Ava nodded, feeling a little nervous. "Nice to meet you, Judith. I'm Ava Brooks. I just moved in." Judith's eyes flicked over Ava from head to toe, as if trying to find something wrong. "I see. You live at number 12, right?" "That's right." Judith took a step closer and looked at the house. "I wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood. We have strict rules here to keep things looking nice." Ava smiled politely. "I understand. I've read the HOA guidelines online and I plan to follow them." Judith's smile disappeared. "Good. We expect everyone to follow the rules exactly. Even small mistakes can cause problems." Ava felt a little uncomfortable. The woman's tone was sharp and her words felt like a warning. "Is there anything specific you wanted to talk about?" Ava asked. Judith folded her arms. "Not now. But I will be watching." With that, she turned and walked away. Ava stood there, holding the box, feeling confused. She wanted to be part of the community, but Judith's visit had felt more like a threat than a welcome. Over the next few days, Ava noticed Judith appearing often, sometimes at the mailbox, sometimes across the street, and even once when Ava was planting flowers in her garden. Each time, Judith's eyes seemed to follow her, watching for mistakes. Ava tried to stay calm, but the constant attention made her uneasy. One afternoon, as Ava was trimming the bushes near her porch, Judith appeared again. "Ava, can I have a word?" Judith asked, her voice cold. Ava put down her pruning shears and wiped her hands on her jeans. "Of course." Judith stepped closer and lowered her voice. "We've had some complaints." Ava's heart skipped a beat. "Complaints? About what?" Judith pointed to the side of the house. "Your trash bins. They are supposed to be kept out of sight except on trash collection days." Ava blinked. She had checked the rules carefully. She always put the bins out only on trash day and brought them back in immediately after. "I'm careful about the trash bins," Ava said gently. "I don't think I'm breaking any rules." Judith smiled thinly. "We'll be watching." Ava nodded, but inside, she felt frustrated. She looked around the street. Many neighbors had their bins out a little longer, but no one else had been told anything. That evening, Ava sat at her kitchen table with a small stack of papers, Hoa rules, emails, and notes. She was trying to understand what she had done wrong. But everything she read said her actions were fine. Still, the feeling of being watched and judged didn't leave her. Later that week, Judith appeared at the door again. This time, she was joined by 2 other Hoa members. They stood on the porch, arms crossed. "We need to speak with you about your landscaping," Judith said. Ava invited them inside, wanting to be polite. But the meeting quickly became uncomfortable. Judith and the others pointed out minor details: the height of the grass, the color of the flowers, the type of outdoor furniture Ava had chosen. "You need to make these changes within a week," Judith said firmly. "It's part of the community standards." Ava took notes quietly. She didn't want to argue. She wanted to understand and cooperate. After they left, Ava sat on her couch, feeling overwhelmed. She thought about calling a lawyer or someone who could help explain the rules better. She didn't want to cause trouble, but she also wanted to protect her home. That night, Ava's phone buzzed with a message. It was from a young woman who lived a few houses down. "I saw what's happening," the message said. "If you ever need help or just someone to talk to, I'm here." Ava smiled for the first time that day. Maybe she wasn't alone after all. The next morning, Ava went to the local coffee shop to clear her mind. She ordered her usual latte and sat near the window, watching the world go by. While she sipped her drink, a man approached her table. "Hi, Ava, right?" he asked with a friendly smile. "Yes," Ava said, surprised. "I'm Mark. I live 2 streets over. I heard about the situation with the Hoa. It's unfair, and I want to help if I can." Ava felt a warm rush of gratitude. "Thank you, Mark. That means a lot." As the days passed, Ava started to connect with a few neighbors who supported her. They shared stories of their own struggles and offered advice. But Judith continued to watch closely, her visits becoming more frequent and her tone more demanding. Ava knew this was only the beginning of a bigger challenge. But she also knew she was not going to give up. Her home was hers, and she was ready to fight for her right to live in peace. Ava's days began to feel heavier. Every morning, she woke up hoping things would get easier, but the opposite seemed true. The Homeowners Association, HOA, was watching her closely, and their scrutiny felt like a shadow following her everywhere. It started with small things, tiny details that didn't seem important at first. Ava found notes slipped under her door or taped to her mailbox. The notes were polite but firm, reminding her of community standards she was supposedly not meeting. One morning, Ava opened her mailbox to find a letter from the Hoa. The letter said her porch light was too bright and needed to be changed to a softer bulb. Ava blinked in surprise. She had picked a warm yellow light, the kind she thought would make her porch cozy and welcoming. She looked at the light again. It didn't seem too bright at all. A few days later, another note arrived. This time, it complained that her welcome mat was unsightly and did not meet the Hoa's design guidelines. Ava loved the mat. It was blue with yellow flowers, a gift from her mother. It felt like a small piece of home in her new neighborhood. Ava tried to follow the rules. She called the Hoa office to ask for clearer guidelines about the porch light and the welcome mat. The person on the phone was polite but gave vague answers. "We just want to keep the neighborhood looking its best," they said. Frustration grew inside Ava. It felt like no matter what she did, it was never enough. She looked around her street and saw neighbors with bright lights and colorful mats, and no letters from the Hoa. One afternoon, Ava was watering her plants when she heard footsteps behind her. It was Judith Caldwell, the Hoa board member who seemed to enjoy pointing out Ava's mistakes. "Good afternoon, Ava," Judith said, smiling thinly. "I see you're still using the porch light I mentioned." "Yes," Ava replied calmly. It's a warm yellow light. I thought it was soft enough. Judith shook her head. It's still too bright. We'll be sending you another notice if it's not changed soon. Ava felt her chest tighten. I'm trying to follow the rules, Judith. Judith's eyes narrowed slightly. Well, you have to do better. The neighborhood depends on it. Ava forced a polite smile, but inside, she felt a storm of emotions: anger, sadness, confusion. That evening, Ava sat at her desk, surrounded by papers and letters. She began to write a journal, pouring out her feelings onto the pages. Writing helped her stay strong. She reminded herself why she had worked so hard to get this house. She would not let anyone take that away. Ava also started to take photos of her porch, her welcome mat, and the lights around her house. She wanted to keep proof of how she was following the rules. It felt like preparing for a battle she never wanted to fight. A few days later, Ava received another letter. This time, the Hoa complained about the way she had parked her car in the driveway. According to them, it was not aligned with community standards. Ava looked at her car. It was neatly parked, leaving enough space for others to walk by. But the letter was clear: she had to move it. Feeling frustrated, Ava talked to a neighbor she had started to trust, Mrs. Jenkins, a kind woman who had lived on the street for many years. Mrs. Jenkins, Ava said one afternoon, have you ever had problems with the Hoa? Mrs. Jenkins smiled sadly. Oh, Ava, they have their favorites. Some people get a pass, but others don't. It's just how things are. Ava nodded. It doesn't seem fair. No, it isn't, Mrs. Jenkins said softly. But you're strong. Don't let them push you around. Encouraged by Mrs. Jenkins' words, Ava decided to attend the next Hoa meeting. She wanted to speak up for herself and understand why she was being treated differently. The meeting was held in a small community center. Ava arrived early and took a seat near the back. Around the room, she saw familiar faces, some friendly, some cold. When Judith Caldwell took the floor, she began by talking about community values and keeping the neighborhood beautiful. Then she pointed out concerns about Ava's property. Ava raised her hand when it was her turn to speak. Her voice was steady but filled with passion. I've tried to follow every rule, Ava said. I want to be a good neighbor. But I feel like I'm being singled out. Other houses have similar lights and decorations, but I'm the only one getting letters. The room was silent. Judith frowned and replied, we are simply enforcing the rules equally. Ava looked around and noticed some neighbors nodding quietly, but others avoided her gaze. After the meeting, a few neighbors approached Ava to offer support. They told her they had noticed the unfair treatment and were sorry she had to face it alone. Ava felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the neighborhood was not as closed as she thought. But that hope was mixed with worry. She knew the fight was just beginning. That night, Ava sat on her porch and looked at the stars. The letters, the meetings, the whispers, it all felt heavy. But Ava remembered why she was here. This house was her dream. She had built her life to reach this moment. She promised herself she would stand strong. She would fight with kindness, courage, and patience. Because her home was worth fighting for. Ava's life in the neighborhood had become tense. What started as small complaints and quiet judgment had grown into something bigger. The notes and letters from the Homeowners Association had become more frequent, and Judith Caldwell's visits felt like tests Ava could never pass. One bright Saturday morning, Ava was sitting on her porch reading a book when she heard a knock at the door. She stood up, thinking it was a friendly neighbor coming to say hello. Instead, she saw Judith standing there, flanked by two other Hoa board members. Good morning, Ava, Judith said with a cold smile. We need to talk. Ava felt her heart beat faster. Of course. What's this about? Judith stepped inside uninvited. The other two followed without hesitation. Ava was surprised but stayed calm. "We've received new concerns about your property," Judith began. "We need to verify your ownership." Ava frowned. "I don't understand. I have the deed to this house. I am the owner." Judith crossed her arms. "There have been some questions raised, so until they are resolved, we need you to leave the property temporarily." Ava's eyes widened in shock. "Leave my own house? On what grounds?" Judith didn't answer. Instead, she said, "It's a standard procedure while we verify ownership. We'll be in touch." Ava stood silently, confused and hurt. She looked at her guests, her neighbors, who had come into her home with no invitation, asking her to leave the place she called her own. "No," Ava said firmly. "I'm not leaving my house. This is my home." Judith's smile faded. "We'll have to take legal action if you don't cooperate." Ava's phone buzzed. She looked down to see a message from a friend who was a real estate lawyer. Quickly, Ava called her friend. "I need help," she said quietly. Within the hour, her lawyer friend arrived. He listened carefully as Ava explained what had happened. "Judith and the HOA don't have the right to ask you to leave your property without proper legal documents," the lawyer said. "You own this house, and you have proof. If they try to force you out, that would be harassment." Judith and the other HOA members watched as the lawyer spoke. The lawyer handed them a letter explaining Ava's rights. "You need to stop this harassment immediately," the letter said. Judith looked uneasy but said nothing. The lawyer stayed for a little while to make sure Ava felt safe. Before leaving, he said, "If this continues, we can take stronger legal action." Ava thanked him and felt a mix of relief and worry. She had stood her ground, but the battle was far from over. After the visitors left, Ava sat on her couch, her hands trembling slightly. She thought about how close she had come to losing her home. She realized that Judith and the HOA were not just about rules, they wanted to make her leave. Ava's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video sent by a teenage neighbor named Maya. Maya had quietly recorded the confrontation between Ava and the HOA members earlier that day. The video showed Ava calmly explaining her ownership, Judith demanding she leave, and the lawyer stepping in to protect her. Ava watched the video and felt hope. The next day, the video was shared online by Maya's older brother, who had a social media account with many followers. Within hours, people were talking about Ava's story. Comments poured in, showing support and outrage at how the HOA treated her. News outlets contacted Ava for interviews. She agreed, wanting to share her experience and raise awareness. The neighborhood buzzed with attention. Some neighbors who had stayed silent now came forward to support Ava. Others avoided her completely. Judith called an emergency HOA meeting. Behind closed doors, the board members argued about how to handle the growing attention. But Ava was no longer alone. Community groups, civil rights organizations, and even local politicians reached out to offer help. For the first time since moving in, Ava felt a strong sense of support. She knew the fight was not just about her house anymore, it was about fairness, respect, and justice for everyone. As she looked out her window that evening, Ava felt a deep calm inside. Her home was hers. And she was ready to stand strong. After the video of Ava's confrontation with the HOA members went viral, her life changed in ways she hadn't expected. Suddenly, her quiet neighborhood became the center of attention. People from outside the community started following her story, sending messages of support. Local news reporters knocked on her door, eager to hear what she had to say. At first, Ava felt overwhelmed. She had only wanted a peaceful home, a place where she could feel safe and happy. But now, she was at the heart of a conversation about fairness and respect. Despite the pressure, Ava stayed calm. She knew she needed to keep fighting, but also to listen to the people who reached out to her. Many neighbors who had stayed quiet before started approaching her with words of kindness. One afternoon, Ava was at the park near her house when an older man named Mr. Thomas approached her. He was a retired teacher who had lived in the neighborhood for over 30 years. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how the Hoa treated you," Mr. Thomas said quietly. "It's not right. You belong here just like anyone else." Ava smiled warmly. "Thank you, Mr. Thomas. That means a lot." More neighbors joined the conversation. Some admitted they had been afraid to speak up, worried about conflict. Others shared stories of their own experiences with the Hoa. Ava realized that many people in the neighborhood wanted change, but didn't know how to start. With their encouragement, Ava agreed to organize a community meeting. She wanted neighbors to come together and talk openly about the issues they faced. She hoped that by working together, they could build a stronger, kinder neighborhood. The day of the meeting arrived. Ava was nervous but hopeful. She set up chairs in the local community center and prepared notes to guide the discussion. As neighbors gathered, Ava welcomed them with a smile. The room was filled with people of all ages and backgrounds, some familiar faces, some new. She began by sharing her story, the challenges she had faced with the Hoa, the letters, the unfair treatment, and the fight to keep her home. Many people listened quietly. Some nodded in agreement, others wiped away tears. Then, the floor was opened for neighbors to speak. One woman shared how she had felt ignored by the Hoa when her husband became ill. Another man spoke about the importance of kindness and respect in their community. The conversation was honest and heartfelt. People talked about the need for clearer rules, but also for fairness and understanding. Judith Caldwell was invited to the meeting but did not attend. At the end of the meeting, the neighbors agreed to form a new neighborhood committee. The goal was to work with the Hoa to improve communication and fairness. Ava was chosen to be a member of the committee, along with Mr. Thomas and a few others. Over the next weeks, Ava worked closely with her neighbors. They wrote letters to the Hoa, asking for changes to the rules and better treatment of all residents. They also planned events to bring the community together: picnics, clean-up days, and neighborhood walks. Slowly, the neighborhood began to feel different. People smiled more, talked more, and helped each other. Ava felt proud of what they were building. It was more than just a house or a neighborhood, it was a community. One morning, as Ava was watering her garden, Judith appeared again. This time, her tone was different. "Ava, I wanted to say. I've heard from the Hoa board. They want to work with you." Ava looked at her, surprised but cautious. "I hope that means real change." Judith nodded slowly. "It does. We want to listen and improve." Ava smiled. "That's all I ever wanted." As Judith walked away, Ava felt a sense of hope. The road ahead might still be long, but things were changing. Her home was safe. Her neighbors were becoming friends. And she had found her place. Days turned into weeks, and Ava began to see real changes in her neighborhood. The tension that had once filled the air started to lift, replaced by small acts of kindness and cooperation. The new neighborhood committee, which Ava was part of, worked hard to bring everyone together, including the Hoa. Ava was surprised to find that even Judith Caldwell, who had once been so cold and strict, began to soften. After the last conversation, Judith reached out to Ava, inviting her to attend monthly Hoa meetings as a community representative. At first, Ava was unsure. She worried it might be a trap or a way to control her. But with encouragement from her neighbors and her own desire for peace, she agreed. The first meeting Ava attended was different from the ones before. The room still held the familiar faces of the Hoa board, but the mood was less tense. Ava felt a mix of nervousness and hope. Judith greeted her politely. "Thank you for coming, Ava." "You're welcome," Ava replied with a smile. The meeting began with discussions about revising the community rules to be clearer and fairer. Ava listened carefully and shared her ideas. She suggested the Hoa should explain rules in simple language, so no one would be confused. Many neighbors had experienced problems because the rules were complicated or unclear. Ava also spoke about the importance of treating everyone with respect, no matter their background. The Hoa board listened quietly. Some nodded in agreement, others looked thoughtful. After the meeting, a few board members approached Ava. "Your ideas are good," said one man. "We want to work together to make the neighborhood better." Ava felt proud but also realistic. Change would take time. Back at home, Ava continued organizing community events. The neighborhood picnics became popular, with families bringing food and games. People who had never spoken before now laughed and shared stories. One sunny afternoon, Ava was setting up chairs for a community cleanup day when she noticed Judith helping a group of children pick up trash. Seeing Judith working alongside everyone surprised Ava. It was a sign that walls were coming down. Ava walked over and thanked Judith. Judith smiled. "I'm learning. This neighborhood means more than rules. It's about people." Ava nodded. "Yes, it is." Slowly, Ava's relationship with Judith improved. They still had disagreements, but those were fewer and less tense. They began to communicate with honesty and respect. Meanwhile, Ava's neighbors who had once been silent became active voices for kindness. They formed a support network, checking in on each other and sharing helpful information. One evening, Ava received a call from Maya, the teenage neighbor who had first recorded the video that started it all. "Hey, Ava," Maya said excitedly. "I just wanted to say thanks. You changed our neighborhood." Ava smiled. "Thank you, Maya. You helped too." The community's strength was growing. However, Ava knew there could still be challenges ahead. Some people in the neighborhood were slow to accept change, and old habits died hard. One day, Ava received a letter not from the Hoa this time, but from a neighbor who disagreed with the new direction. The letter was polite but clear: "We prefer the old ways. The new rules and committees are unnecessary." Ava sighed but replied kindly, inviting the neighbor to attend the next community meeting and share their thoughts. Ava believed that listening was the key to true unity. As the months passed, Ava saw how much her home and neighborhood had transformed. What had begun as a difficult struggle became a journey of understanding and friendship. She looked out her window one evening and saw neighbors talking on their porches, children playing in the street, and the soft glow of porch lights welcoming everyone. Ava felt a deep sense of peace. Her home was more than a place, it was a community she had helped build. And that was the greatest victory of all. The neighborhood had changed a lot since Ava first moved in. What had once been a place filled with tension and unfairness was now a community built on respect and understanding. Ava felt proud when she looked around and saw neighbors talking, laughing, and helping each other. Her home was no longer just her house, it was part of a caring neighborhood. One bright Saturday morning, the community gathered at the park for a special event, a celebration of how far they had come together. Ava stood at the center, feeling a mix of happiness and relief. The picnic tables were full of food, the children played games, and the neighbors chatted freely. Judith Caldwell was there too. This time, her smile was genuine. She walked up to Ava and said, "I'm glad we could get to this point." "Me too," Ava replied warmly. "It took a lot of work, but it was worth it." The mayor of the town had come to speak at the event. She praised the neighborhood for showing how people could come together and solve problems with kindness and patience. Ava listened as the mayor spoke about the importance of community and respect. It reminded her of how difficult things had been just months ago and how much had changed. After the speech, neighbors took turns sharing their stories. Some talked about the struggles they faced with the Hoa in the past. Others shared hopes for the future, a future where everyone felt welcome and valued. Ava spoke last. She thanked everyone for their courage and kindness, especially those who had stood by her when things were hard. I learned something important during this journey, Ava said. A home is not just a building. It's the people around us. It's the support, the friendship, and the respect we share. Together, we can make any place a home. The crowd applauded, and Ava felt a warm glow inside. Later that day, as the sun began to set, Ava walked home with a few neighbors. They talked about plans for new community projects, gardens, clean UPS, and events to bring everyone even closer. Ava smiled to herself. She thought about how different her life was now. She had faced unfairness and challenges, but she never gave up. She stood up for herself and her home, and in doing so, helped create something better for everyone. That evening, Ava sat on her porch, looking out at the street. The lights from neighbors' homes shone softly, and she could hear the gentle sound of laughter and conversation. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Maya, the teenager who had helped by sharing the video. "Thank you for never giving up," the message said. Ava replied, "We all did it together." As Ava closed her phone, she felt a deep sense of peace. The fight had been hard, but the victory was sweeter than she had ever imagined. Her home was safe. Her neighbors were friends. And her heart was full. Ava knew that life would always have its challenges, but she also knew she was stronger because of this journey. She was ready for whatever came next. Because now, she wasn't just living in a house, she was part of a community that cared. And that made all the difference.